Well, good evening, everybody, and Amy and Jacob, everyone. Thanks for inviting us to do this. This is really fun. I miss Austin. I did my undergrad work there many, many years ago, and so at least I get a little bit of a connection to Austin. And again, I want to thank Linda for jumping in, one of my dearest friends and a remarkable woman. So anyway, thanks. And I guess we'll just kick this off now. This is just a quick little project. We're going to talk about it quickly and then maybe Q&A. I sold this.
Hank, I'm going to jump in for just a second. Your gorgeous face is not on the screen. So if you want to turn that video on, that might, people might, there you go. There he is. Cutie. Thank you.
Well, you know, digitally, I'm, you know, one of the special needs. Jacob knows that all too well. So great. Thanks, Linda. So with that said, let's see if I can advance. Now, why am I not advancing, Jacob? Technical difficulties. There we go. Thank you. So my apologies. So the concept of this little project that we're going to start, I'm going to start this this fall, early winter, is to try to use creativity as a platform for different audiences, different demographics. But the first try is going to be for teen expression, using open verse poetry, drawing, scheduling, those kinds of things. Optional recognition if the student, the child, the kid wants to be recognized. If not, that's fine too. So it's in a way kind of a modified way to journal, led by a facilitator in terms of a school teacher or a facilitator, what have you, and using this creativity, this poetry as a platform for doing that. Linda, do you want to jump in real quick? I wanted to add about 400 pages, but they wouldn't let me.
I'm an educator, been an educator for a few decades. I'm known mainly for alternative type education and taking low performing schools and students who are usually not the kids that they think are going to do outstanding, and they do outstanding. I'm the principal of Garza Independence High School, which is a public school in Austin and ranked one of the top 5 in the nation. When I talked to Hank about this, the thing that I'm most concerned about, and I think a lot of educators are as we move back in, I'm not going to take too much time, I promise, Hank, is that the kids, there's a lot of things kids are dealing with. We're dealing with a lot, but these students have been in a time of their life when being with their peers is one of the most important things to them and how they've adapted. And one of the things we have to figure out as educators is how to get them to talk about it. And we know that poetry and expression, we can read part of it. We personally at Garza we read essays that kids write, and that's led literally to saving a child's life by sending the police officer over to the house. So it's important. It's important to hear what kids are thinking, and it's going to be critically important as kids no longer have the option here in Austin to do virtually, but they're going to be put into a classroom, especially kids who are anxious about being there anyway. So when Hank talked about this project, I thought it was an incredible place to start with teenagers. So I'm going to stop there, Hank.
When I kind of pitched this to my publisher, one of the first person that came to mind was Linda in terms of her experience. And I have a few other people that have agreed to kind of help guide me through this project we'll talk about later. So you can see by my background, I just never was able to keep a steady job. So I've had quite a wonderful life, but a lot of that poetry has been centric in all those things, from my career as a fire chief to being a ballet dancer in Austin Ballet many years ago, adjunct professor. So poetry has really been key to that. And I started writing before I went to UT and did my undergraduate work there. So again, it's been centric to me, and it's really helped me. It's helped my family, my children, etc. So I thought this was a good platform. So the construct, and again, this is all proposed. So I'm still looking for feedback, and I'm looking for some more technical guidance as we put this together. I have about 5 or 6 educators who have agreed to beta test this once we get this put together in draft before we actually go to final print. But these are, again, so these are examples. These are not set in concrete, but we'll have sections, if you will, that'll serve as prompts to resonate with the target audience and the age group and the demographic. They may be examples like the ones that you see there. I'm not being heard, or I would like to be heard, or why am I different, or why do I feel different, or why am I invisible, or why do I want to be invisible? So part of that is the importance of connecting to those feelings and to those perceived or labels, or to the power of those labels, whether they be accurate or inaccurate. And why poetry? Poetry versus prose. Well, to me, the purpose and the significance of poetry is that it's brief, and you can tie feeling and metaphor and fear and safety together with a few strokes of a pen on one page. And that's the beginning of sharing those emotions and being able to look back at it. So the construct, I think, in some ways is a lot simpler, especially if it's free verse. So I don't think it would be as challenging or as intimidating to some people that haven't written before. And probably one of my mentors, Chuck, who passed away about 4 years ago, was a writer all his life. But again, these are just examples of a writer who wrote for 60 years or more. But it doesn't take much to paint a picture. And some of the poetry that my daughters read, one when she was kind of really in crisis as a teenager, some of them very powerful, and it really helped validate her and her experience. So, if again, why poetry? This is probably the closest one sentence I can come that it is. It's sent from one human heart to another, or from the writer to their own heart. So again, I think there's a lot of power in that. And Linda, jump in if you need to. So the chapter introduction will come up with certain prompts as chapter titles or sections. And then each one will have a starter poem and an illustration, mainly as a catalyst. And then blank pages will follow. And they'll be facilitated for someone to sketch or put in a photograph that they've taken, even off their smartphone, or to journal, or to put down an entry, draft a poem of 1 line or 10 lines or 50, whatever. So I think that's the most important thing. But so the vast majority of the book will be blank pages. Can
I jump in there, Hank?
Yeah.
I think one of the really important things about this is the different avenues that he allows, that this process will allow students. We have students who are incredible at pulling things from the web that everybody thinks, oh, well, they just pulled them from the web. Actually, there's a lot of thought that goes into what they take and what they represent from themselves. And poetry, even though Hank mentioned many things, one of the things is you don't have to write a 5-paragraph paper. For some kids, the shorter the verse and the more concentrated their feelings, the easier it is for them. So the multitudes of avenues of expression is, we just want to hear their thoughts. We want to be able to feel their heart. And this allows them to do this in an academic but non-judgmental setting, which a lot of our students aren't allowed to do with the normal TEKS and curriculum that they have. So it just gives us another avenue to reach the kid who is not going to address the needs that you think they need to in the normal academic setting. So thank you.
I agree, and these examples, of course, are a little bit maybe a little sophisticated. They're again just examples, but I agree with Linda. In essence, the speed of the participation, or the governor of that speed, the person that is in control is the student. And with free verse, there's a lot of power in that, and hopefully we can create it so that there's expression, but it's in a very safe manner. So that again, there's not a norm, there's not a set continuum. That it has to do mainly with expression. So we can have photographs as well, and they can come right off of smartphones. We can download them, we can print them, we can, the kids can, the student, the participant can Scotch tape them or glue them into the book and write about that particular photograph of a friend or of an event. It can be a doodle or a sketch as well. All of them have power. And the other power too is whether the student wants these to be shared or not. Some of the power is being able a day or a week or a year or 5 years later to go back and read your own work and read your own journal. And sometimes that's pretty cathartic, and sometimes that's pretty pivotal in terms of your own self-acceptance and knowing that you have a community that starts with you. I think that's the power of poetry as well, to me. So when this chapter or section closes after all these blank pages, which can be used in any mode that the participant wants, one word a page, or lots, doodle, whatever, artwork, whatever. But at the end, the intent is to have some relevant resources and links and models for that participant. So if there's something that comes up for that student, there are some links that they can say, well, you're not being heard. Well, here's a few links. Here's some things that I can go look at. But then maybe there's some other resources for me that came up for me while I was doing this and filling in these blank pages. Same thing with definitions, like examples. What's a metaphor? What's symbolism? Things that, and also encourage students to read poems in the classroom or on social media if they're comfortable with that. So there'll be kind of a closure, and that closure will also work for the facilitator in terms of encouraging students to maybe look at some of those resources. So in the preface of the book, I wanted to put this last in the presentation. There will be facilitator guidance in the book. It'd be brief. Let's say if you're going to do this, these are the things that are critical, in terms of having a construct, but really no clearly defined edges or boundaries, that this is more about self-expression and acceptance. And this is, you're more of, again, just a very vague facilitator, if you will. The resources right now, of course, is Dr. Webb. I'm delighted that she's already been giving me some guidance. Another dear friend of mine, Tim Burns, who is also now retired, but an international expert on adolescent brain development. He's been teaching all over the world for the last 20 years. And so he's going to give me a lot of technical guidance, as well as Vittorio Lacerva, who, again, a dear friend of almost 40 years. He's a public health doc, retired, but he's written 4 or 5 books on violence with teens and young adults and violence prevention. And so those are the 3 people there, and maybe you, whoever's listening in. If you have ideas, I welcome anything, and would really appreciate that. The cover of the book will come up with a lovely title and some real nice illustration. And it'll be by whomever, and I want the title, the cover of the book to have a blank page, a blank like this, something that can be typed on, something that can be with a Sharpie, so that a student can actually write his or her or their name on this and say, yeah, I've published a book, here it is. So that may also be some kind of validation. That's really it. I just wanted to get to questions and discussions. So That's the idea, and that's what's going to start. I've wrapped up 2 other writing projects last winter, and the other one's going to be done in about another 3 weeks. So I'm open, so I can start this fall. So, thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Hank and Linda. So I have a question to kind of start this out because I have a little bit of forehand knowledge. What are some other groups that you've done poetry work with, Hank?
Well, I've published a handful of books over the last 30 or 40 years. But one of the things that I do is there's the New Mexico Men's Wellness Association, which is in their 36th year now. And one of the things that we've done is we publish a quarterly publication. You can Google it. It's Man, Alive with an exclamation point. And we just went to a digital version of that about 3 years ago. And I got kind of voluntold for that. It's a labor of love, but it's a way to encourage men of any age to participate, if you will. But so it's kind of a quarterly writing journal, if you will. So I've done that. We've done poetry workshops at many of our gatherings throughout New Mexico. There's an organization called Santa Fe Youth Works, and it's at-risk teenagers. And we've worked with them not only in terms of career and outdoor education and even wildfire training to writing and creative writing and even some jewelry and sculpture. So there's a few there, as well as we're just finishing an anthology that ought to be printed in the next 6 weeks called A Wind Blows Through Us, a collection, a festival of New Mexico men's poetry. So there's a few.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, I have a question for Linda as well. And specifically, it's about whether or not you've had some opportunities to have students perform their poetry. Is that something that happens in the school from time to time, or is there any method where students are allowed to share poetry currently, or would this be a new thing if it was instituted at your school?
Actually, a lot of times, a lot of schools do, they publish, even in elementary schools, they publish kids' poems. And part of obviously high school curriculum is learning how to publish and learning to go through all of that. So there's multiple ways that students use it, not just in the high school level, but also at the elementary level. Hank has come to talk to my school, but one thing that Hank didn't mention was he was the firefighter at the Pentagon who received the flag on 9/11 for helping save the Pentagon. And so one of the neat things is, I mean, when Hank came, we literally had to do more than one, which we were really surprised because we thought our kids, 9/11, whatever, we literally had to have him present twice because we could not get everybody into one setting. And when you have a man with Hank's reputation of being, you know, because when you think about the firefighter running into the Pentagon, and I mean, he's literally in the museum at the 9/11 site, and then you hear this man talk about expressing himself in poetry, that adds almost a, I don't know how to say it, it's almost this passage of allowing these young men as they are trying to figure out who they are and what they are, and young women who are trying to figure out, do I need to be this or that, this dichotomy. So one of the things I think Hank and I disagree on is I think it would be very, very advantageous at the beginning of this for him to do that bio of, you know, the award, the flag being presented, so that they see that the heart that had him run into the fire is also the heart that has him write a poem about a grandchild, that there's not a difference in that. It's the heart of a hero, whether you're a caretaker for a grandchild or a child, or you're a caretaker of a stranger who has been, you know, obviously in great danger. I think that's the beauty that we could add to it. So if there's any pressure y'all want to put on Hank, I would totally put the pressure on, let somebody else write it. There's a lot of people who would write it, but put that, the expression of a hero is seen into running a fire as well as sharing your heart in the poem. So him and I did not agree for me to say that. So luckily we're a few states apart. So I just threw that out there to the public. So there you go.
Well, that was beautiful. And that actually segues really nicely into a question that we got in the chat, which is, the person says, I really like poetry, but it feels difficult to learn the rules or the forms of poetry. How would you recommend learning to start writing poems? And that's open to either of you.
My first thought is, don't think that there are any rules. Number one. I think that's important. I mean, there are certain type, there are all sorts of poetry styles and forms that are very complex. I struggle with those as an English major, as an undergrad at the University of Texas. But there are no rules. I think the rule is you need to write freely. The first book I published, which is absolutely horrible, because when I found out I was going to, the publisher said, hey, we're going to publish this book, I changed all my poetry because I thought, well, it's not good enough. So I was not writing from the heart. So I think a lot of it is, jot down something and look, if something reminds you, or there's a metaphor. It has to be truthful, your own truth. There's no form, there's no link, there's no style. And I think once you do that, then you can, it either works just as you wrote it, or you can close the book and let it cook, put it back in the oven and let it simmer for a while, and then look at it again and see where it goes from there. So again, to me, it's from the heart. It's not form. And whatever you write, if it's sincere, it's good because it's yours.
I think I would add to that I think that's one of the problems we have with teaching children to write, and adolescents and even adults, is when we talk and people correct us because we don't say it correctly, or if we write something. I'm a horrible speller. I have a PhD. I have all this stuff. I've been published all over the place. If we did not have spell check, nothing I ever wrote would be published because I'm a horrible speller. Thank God I had a mother who would help correct me. But I can remember, and anybody who saw To Sir with Love, it was one of the most incredible moments in a film when this child spills their heart out and the person graded it on grammar and spelling. We need to always remember that there's always a correct way to do things. And obviously, I'm going to tell you, you need to learn to write properly if you're, blah, blah, blah. But that's not the most important thing. I know a lot of people who can write well and say absolutely nothing. And I know a lot of people who aren't educated and in the formal sense who can move you to start a movement. So the first thing you need to learn to do is to express yourself, to get your point across, and then you take it to somebody who is a tutor, who is somebody, if that's that important to you, realize that there are people who are trained who can help you put it there. But the thing you can't train is what is your soul and heart trying to say to somebody? And how many times do we not listen to people because we're prejudging how they're saying it? Don't ever interrupt a child and try to fill in what they're saying. Let them have the time to say it, which I think is what the blank pages do. You have that space. And part of, I think, being the facilitator in something like this is I would put some things in. These are things you should look out for. These are signs that the child might be in trouble. But I would also say, what are you looking for? And it wouldn't be grammar. It wouldn't be verse. It would be, can you feel what they're saying? And how do we help people at all levels be able to express themselves genuinely so that we can go? So I think it's great. And I think there's books that can teach you how to do that verse. Not something, I was a math and science teacher, not something I would do, but people who can do that. But that's the second part. That's the last part. That's the finished part. Put down what you feel. That's real poetry. You know, that's real poetry. And then we teach you the different types of poetry, and you get to decide as the writer, where does that fit in best for me? And, you know, I always remember James Joyce. I mean, he doesn't use a period. Okay, but he's considered to have the greatest book of all time. You could not turn that into any of my teachers and get a grade that you would have liked. You know, you got to use that. So we're too stuck on this is what is, so this is what should be. Your thoughts never were anything but your thoughts. And we need to help you, if that's important to you, put it in the frame that it is.
I feel like I should jump up on top of a desk and start chanting "Captain, my captain" or something like that. But yes, so one of the kind of wrap up, I have two questions for you. And the first one is, do you think this project would be scalable to single students, like in a tutorial situation, or could it be done something similar for elementary school students? This first question.
I hope that the demographic, we can alter the construct of the book for any age group in terms of students. But I've already talked to a poet that lives in southern New Mexico. They're very interested in this book to go into the state prisons. So I think, again, the blank page, that's the way you get rid of, as Linda said, the should. You know, the old saying, we got to quit shoulding on ourselves. Well, the blank pages get rid of that. They really do. And so I think there are a lot of demographics that could do that. And I did skip over one slide, but I want to make sure that people know that this book is nonprofit. If this works and we print it, I'm gonna cover the costs. If an educator wants to do this, they can contact me and say, I want 30 copies. Unless I get, and I don't think this is gonna take off, but if it gets to where I just can't afford the number of copies, then they would pay for shipping and they would pay for the author's printing cost of the books only. But in the interim, in the beginning, I'll buy the books, I'll buy them from the printer, I'll ship them to that address and say, go for it. That's what's important to me. This is not a for-profit. I'm blessed with, I have a retirement, and I'm very fortunate with that. And this is one way I can give back so much that the world's given me all my life. So just, you know, so again, I think we can make this fit if people are interested.
Wonderful. And so if people want to reach out and offer their assistance or support, then they would contact you at hbfire88@gmail.com. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So I feel like the kind of wrap up question that I would like to have for you tonight, and this is for both of you or either of you, however you want to handle it. I saw that you had, you know, a counselor, a public health researcher, a professional education leader. What other kind of help are you looking for? Because you've got some pretty heavy guns like already on that list. Like, do you need people who are good at websites or graphic design, or like what could we do for you?
Yes.
I'd like to add something. I think when you talk about what are the different medias, I think that one of the medias that teenagers particularly, and even younger than that, are very comfortable with is this very much adapts itself to an online program. Because that way the child can go and pull pictures. And if you don't think pictures have a meaning and an understanding, we did something a few years back, which we were really surprised, is we said, draw or pull down from the internet what you feel is America. And we were waiting for, you know, Uncle Sam and the flag, and we got guns and violence. And it was an eye-opener for us. And we're with teenagers all the time to realize that when we see a flag, because it was, what does the American flag represent to you? They saw people going in to conquer other people and to suppress people and understand the time in which they, and so it made us realize that things that we do and say is trapped in our own knowledge. And when you give students, especially students who might have different learning disabilities or are very difficult to express themselves, if they can express themselves by pulling something off of the internet where they're very comfortable. So when I think of the avenues in which Hank can go, I think of, especially as we're having online learning for a lot of kids, we have a ton of homeschoolers across the country. I think it opens it up. But what we have to be careful of is that somebody's paying attention. Because if somebody puts their heart out there and it's something that might scare us, or something that concerns us about the child, because that's where a lot of poetry comes from. And there's a lot of concern right now about what is happening with our youth. And some of the kids we literally cannot find. The only thing we have to make sure of is somebody's paying attention to what is being turned at. So that's
Indeed. Wow. Well, that's a really powerful note to end on. And I really appreciate everyone's time tonight. Linda, Hank, that was great. Thank you so much.